The prison management officials have determined this is the best way to both rectify her bad practices in the past, but also to keep the public safe.
That blasé phrase, bad practices, used by Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale to describe the brutal abduction, rape, and murder of an 8-year-old girl named Tori Stafford, inflamed an already very divisive issue. How could the government defend the decision to move Terri-Lynn McClintic, the woman convicted of Stafford's murder, from a prison to something called an Indigenous Healing Lodge? The spirituality-based correction center apparently offers a more holistic approach to rehabilitation. It teaches inmates life skills like cooking and household chores, but questions are being raised about the facility's security and why someone like McClintic even got to go there. Should the government put her back in prison? Let's bring in MPs to talk about that. Marco Mendicino is a Liberal MP for Ontario. Matthew Dube is the NDP public safety critic. And in Calgary, we are joined by Michelle Rempel, Conservative MP there, and also one of the critics. Let me just start with you, Marco Mendicino. Why can't your government put a child killer in prison? Why does she get to go to a healing lodge after less than 10 years?
Well, let me begin by saying that this is a parent's worst nightmare to lose a child. And you heard Minister Goodale, you heard the Prime Minister extend our most profound sympathies. It's actually, I think, a central point of unity among all members in the House, and I think it's important that we show some sensitivity to the pain and suffering that has been felt by Tori Stafford's parents. This is an offender that was sentenced to life without any chance of parole for 25 years. It's the most serious crime on the books, and she was transferred in 2014 from a maximum security institution to a medium security institution. This was under a Conservative government, and she remains transferred to a medium security institution.
This is different, but just to be fair, since you've invoked Tori Stafford's parents, her father was on the record of saying this has re-victimized him. So how did she get to that Indigenous Healing Center? How come your government can't stop that?
Well, we owe it to Tori Stafford's parents and her family and all victims to be transparent about how it is that inmates are transferred, and that's why Minister Goodale has ordered a review. And there are two purposes that are underlying that review. First, we want to be sure that long-standing policies under Correction Services Canada have been applied correctly to the circumstances of this case and to this particular offender. But we also want to be sure that the policies work going forward. So I know that Minister Goodale is among the most experienced parliamentarians in the House. Canadians can be assured that this review will be thoughtful, it will be deliberate, and we owe it to the Stafford family, we owe it to all victims to make sure that we do this review and communicate it in a transparent way as well.
Michelle Rempel, does that satisfy you?
Well, let me be clear, there's not unity in the House on this issue, not by a long shot, because there's a right answer in this situation and a wrong answer, and what Marco just gave you was the wrong answer. I gave Ralph Goodale the opportunity to apologize in the House twice for calling it bad practices. What happened to that girl, he did not. The Prime Minister has had dozens of opportunities to say he would use, or the Public Safety Minister would use the powers that he has in Section 6 of the Corrections Act to reverse this decision. And let me be perfectly clear. The facility that this disgusting woman was in had razor wire. It was a maximum medium security facility with bars. She was behind bars. She is now in a facility that is a condominium suite with eating areas and kitchenettes where children can go to, where there is no fence, and it is a minimum security facility.
Matthew Dube, what's your sense of this?
There's obviously an issue here over the process, but I think we can all feel absolutely horrible about this disgusting crime, and certainly I don't particularly care for the minister's choice of words either, but I think the big challenge is that I'm always very wary of politicians getting involved in the type of decision that's made. That's a very complicated one based on a multitude of factors about this maximum to security classification.
Let me ask you, why are you wary about, like, if your gut sense as someone that abducts, kidnaps, and rapes and murders an 8-year-old, and then is sitting in basically this healing lodge after 9 years, like, why is that so complicated? Why can't we just say, I'm serious, as a politician, that's wrong, I can't believe that happened, Correction Services, get her back into a real prison?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think that's why I'm supportive of the minister's review, because if we do see that there's some kind of change in the policy that's needed, then that can be moved forward on. But the fact of the matter is that rehabilitation, no matter how horrific the crime, has to have a place if we want to ensure public safety. I don't want people, when the time comes after this long sentence, if this person who committed this horrible crime is back in a community and re-victimizing someone else. And quite frankly, there's a legitimate question to be asked, but I don't particularly care for the graphic details being shared in the House, because that, if I'm thinking of people who have been victims of crime, I don't think it's necessary for us as politicians to be going through these gory details. There's a question to be asked, and I think the review will help us get to the bottom of what's happening.
I don't think we can hide from the details, and Tori Stafford's dad hasn't, and it's horrible. But Marco Mendicino, again, why can't the Justice Minister, why can't the Public Safety Minister, why can't the Prime Minister stand up and say, this is wrong? We're not going to turn this into a review and a process and a policy. These are people. We want this woman in a prison. And we are going to do everything we can to make sure Correction Services Canada gets this woman, not later, not now, back into prison. I don't understand that.
Well, I think because it runs the risk of turning Parliament Hill and the House of Commons into the judge, jury, sentencer, and executioner, and that's not the way our system.
She's been jury and she's been sentenced. But with all due respect, she already has had that.
We have a set of rules in place, and we trust Corrections Canada, the Correctional Services of Canada, and all branches of the administration of justice, of which I worked in for a number of years as a prosecutor, to do their job. But Matthew did touch on an important subject matter, and that is the way in which the House of Commons question period session earlier in the week was transformed into an opportunity to read out some of the graphic details in which Tori Stafford was murdered. There is a way in which we can have vigorous public policy debate without infringing upon the rights.
You will not lecture me on this, Marco.
It's not about lecturing, Michelle.
I will not be lectured on this. No, your public safety minister stood on this TV show and called it bad practices. He needed to be reminded of the details to understand what's at stake here.
There's a way to have this discussion without yelling and without getting upset about it.
And there is wrong, and there is right and this wrong. It's not about hiding. Why would people pay our salaries as legislators or as ministers in the executive branch of the government if it was not up to us to go into the department when a wrong occurs and say, make it right? That is why we have Parliament for these very situations.
And Michelle, I agree with you. We have a responsibility as parliamentarians.
For trivializing the details of this case. He has not apologized for normalizing it by trivializing it. And what he has to do to make it right now is not just apologize, but to say we cannot allow this father to have months of review and months of ongoing bureaucracy when it is a simple responsibility to go into his department with the authority that he has and say, fix it. And frankly, if the Prime Minister doesn't make him do that, that's his problem too.
Michelle, I agree with you that we've got a responsibility as parliamentarians to have a vigorous debate, and you've got a role as official opposition to ask tough questions. But all I'm saying, if I could just be permitted to finish, Michelle.
And anybody watching this is going to be disgusted with you.
Okay,
Michelle,
last word.
Last word is we can have that debate, and including a review of this decision to transfer this particular offender without infringing upon the rights of victims who have a right to dignity and privacy.
What about the rights of Tori Stafford and her family? What about those rights?
We're sensitive to those.
Marco Mendicino, Matthew Dube,
no, you're not.
and Michelle Rempel. I appreciate all of you coming in. Thank you so much.